brotherhood forged in the confines of prison walls, built on the foundation of fear, loyalty, and power. The Mexican Mafia, known as La M, rose from the darkness, growing into one of the most dangerous and influential criminal organizations in history. Within this group were individuals whose actions defined its rise, men whose lives were marked by betrayal, ambition, and brutality. From a leader who overcame his physical limitations to dominate the gang, to another who orchestrated alliances that changed the rules of organized crime, their legacies remain unforgettable. These are the top 5 most dangerous members of the Mexican Mafia. Each name carries a weight of stories, each life defined by choices that left a lasting impact on the underworld and beyond. Their stories are both haunting and revealing, offering a look into the reality of this brotherhood. In the 1950s, within the crowded and dangerous prison yards of California, a group of men came together with one purpose: to survive. Mexican-American inmates, outnumbered and facing hostility from all sides, found strength in unity. What began as a way to protect themselves quickly grew into something much larger, something that would forever alter the world of organized crime. They called themselves the Mexican Mafia, or La M, a name that would become known far beyond prison walls. At its beginnings, it was a brotherhood forged in blood and loyalty, where every action was a statement of power. Over the decades, this organization extended its influence far beyond the confines of the prison system. La M's members became more than prisoners. They became commanders of the streets, orchestrating activities that reached into communities across the country. Their decisions impacted neighborhoods, families, and countless lives as they established control over gangs, drug trafficking, and violence. At number 5, we have Ramon Mundo Mendoza. Mundo was a man whose life was marked by both violence and transformation. Born into a home filled with struggle, his childhood was far from easy. His stepfather, a harsh and abusive figure, left a lasting impression on him. The lessons he learned during those formative years were rooted in survival, strength, and the idea that if you were going to do something, you had to do it right. Mundo grew up in an environment where crime was not just a way of life, it was the only way to carve out a place for himself. This path led him straight into the arms of La M, the Mexican Mafia. Once inside, he quickly gained the respect of those around him, known for his loyalty and his willingness to take on any challenge, no matter how brutal. Mundo's rise within the ranks of the Mexican Mafia was swift. He proved himself time and time again, both inside prison walls and on the streets, becoming a trusted and valuable member of the organization. But for all the power and respect he earned within the gang, there was another side to Ramon Mendoza's story. A side that would eventually lead him to question everything he once believed. While serving time in prison, Mundo began to encounter Christian volunteers who shared messages of forgiveness and redemption. At first, he ignored them, dismissing their words as meaningless, but over time, those messages began to sink in. So, alone in his cell, he reflected on his past, on the lives he had destroyed, and on the pain he had caused. It was during these moments of solitude that he decided to make a change. Ramon Mundo Mendoza did what very few in his position have ever done. He walked away from the Mexican Mafia. Not only did he renounce the gang, but he also dedicated his life to warning others about the dangers of following in his footsteps. His transformation was not just a personal journey. It became a beacon of hope for those who felt trapped in a cycle of violence and crime. Today, Mundo's story stands out as a powerful example of what is possible, even in the darkest of circumstances. While his early life was defined by the choices he made as a member of La M, his later years became a testament to the power of change and redemption. His legacy is one of contrast. A man who was once feared for his actions, now remembered for his courage to turn his life around and make amends for his past. Coming in at number 4 is Peter Sana Ojeda. Peter Sana Ojeda was a man who earned the title of Godfather of Orange County, a name that carried with it both power and fear. Born and raised in Southern California, Ojeda grew up in an environment where gang culture was a way of life. From a young age, he understood the dynamics of loyalty, control, and survival. It was this understanding that would later propel him to the highest ranks of the Mexican Mafia. Unlike many others in La Ime, Ojeda saw the organization not just as a prison gang, but as an opportunity to extend influence far beyond the prison walls. He believed that the streets held untapped potential for control and profit. With this vision, he shifted the focus of the Mexican Mafia from simply managing their dominance in prisons to establishing a firm grip on the streets. One of Ojeda's most significant contributions to the organization was his introduction of a taxation system. He brought together gang leaders and street-level operatives, convincing them to impose taxes on drug dealers operating in their neighborhoods. The profits from these taxes were funneled back to the Mexican Mafia, ensuring a steady flow of money and resources. It wasn't just about making money, it was about creating a system of control that left no room for defiance. Ojeda's plan worked, and soon the reach of Laime stretched further than anyone could have imagined. Ojeda was also known for his ability to broker peace. In the early 1990s, he organized meetings between rival gangs, urging them to put an end to senseless violence and focus instead on strengthening their collective power. At these meetings, held in parks and community spaces, he spoke with authority and clarity, convincing even the most skeptical to follow his lead. Under his guidance, gang rivalries cooled, and a new era of organization and discipline began. But Ojeda's legacy was not without its cost. While his strategies elevated the Mexican Mafia to unprecedented heights, they also left a lasting impact on communities across Southern California. The taxation system he implemented created a climate of fear and dependency, as street gangs became mere extensions of La Me's will. Drug dealers, residents, and rival gangs all found themselves under the influence of a man they would likely never meet. Peter Sano Ojeda's story is one of power and strategy. He was a man who understood how to use words and actions to build an empire. For decades, his influence was felt across neighborhoods, prisons, and entire cities. While his name may not be widely known outside of certain circles, within the world of organized crime, he remains a figure whose impact is undeniable. Ranked at number 3 is Benjamin Topo Peters. Benjamin Topo Peters was a man whose mind was as sharp as his resolve. He was known for his ability to navigate the complexities of power and influence, both inside the walls of the prison system and far beyond them. His rise in the Mexican Mafia was not just about force or intimidation, it was about his ability to strategize, organize, and control. He earned the respect of his peers and the fear of his enemies, not because of his strength, but because of his intellect. Peters understood that for La Ime to thrive, it needed more than just loyalty. It needed structure. From the moment he stepped into a position of leadership, he worked tirelessly to consolidate power within the organization. He brought order to chaos, ensuring that every member knew their place and their role. This approach not only strengthened the gang's presence in California prisons, but also made it nearly impossible for rival groups to challenge their dominance. His leadership was not without its darker moments. To maintain control, Peters sanctioned acts of extreme violence, sending a clear message to anyone who dared to defy the rules. Loyalty was not optional, and discipline was enforced with brutal precision. These actions solidified his reputation as a man who would stop at nothing to ensure the survival and success of La Ime. One of Peters' most significant achievements was his ability to forge alliances with outside criminal organizations. He recognized the potential for profit in collaborating with groups that controlled the flow of drugs into and out of the prison system. By strengthening these ties, Peters not only increased the gang's financial resources, but also expanded its influence beyond the borders of California. This network of connections became a cornerstone of the Mexican Mafia's operations, ensuring a steady supply of money and power. Benjamin Topo Peters was not a man who sought attention or recognition. He worked behind the scenes, pulling the strings that kept La Ime running like a well-oiled machine. His ability to think several steps ahead of his opponents made him one of the most effective leaders in the history of the organization. Today, Peters is remembered as a figure who defined what it meant to lead within the Mexican Mafia. His story is one of strategy and control, of a man who understood the value of order in a world where chaos often reigned. While his name may not be the most famous, his actions left a lasting legacy that continues to be felt within the ranks of La M. Taking the number 2 spot is Rodolfo Shayen Cadena. Rodolfo Shayen Cadena was a name that carried weight both inside the prison walls and on the streets. He was more than just a member of the Mexican Mafia. He was a leader, a man whose charisma and fearlessness earned him respect from those who followed him and fear from those who opposed him. Shayen was a figure who stood out, not just for his actions, but for the way he carried himself in a world where strength and loyalty meant everything. Born in Bakersfield, California in 1943, Cadena grew up in an environment where survival often depended on quick thinking and even quicker action. His reputation for taking risks and standing his ground earned him recognition, and by the time he was incarcerated, he had already built a foundation for the legacy he would leave behind. Once inside the prison system, Shayen's reputation only grew. He wasn't just another inmate, he was a leader who understood the importance of unity. In the early days of the Mexican Mafia, he worked tirelessly to forge alliances with other groups. One of his most notable efforts was building a relationship with the Black Guerrilla family, an organization that shared many of the same enemies and challenges. Through his diplomacy, Cadena demonstrated his ability to think beyond immediate conflicts and focus on the bigger picture. But not all of his alliances were well received. As tensions grew between the Mexican Mafia and Nuestra Familia, Shayen's decisions became a source of conflict. He had a vision of unity among Latino gangs, one that would consolidate power and eliminate infighting. However, this vision threatened rival groups, especially Nuestra Familia, who saw his leadership as a direct challenge to their own influence. The conflict came to a head in December 1972, when Cadena was killed in prison by Nuestra Familia members. His death was brutal, a calculated act meant to send a message. He was stabbed repeatedly and thrown from a balcony, a violent end that shocked many and marked a turning point in the history of the Mexican Mafia. Despite the circumstances of his death, Rodolfo Shayen Cadena was remembered as a martyr by those in La M. His fearlessness and ambition left an impression on the organization, shaping its identity in the years that followed. To this day, his story is told as one of courage and sacrifice, a reminder of both the power and the cost of leadership in a world where trust and betrayal walk hand in hand. Shayen's legacy is complex. He was a man who believed in the possibility of unity, even in the harshest of environments. But his vision, bold as it was, ultimately cost him his life. His name continues to hold meaning, not just for those who knew him, but for the generations of Mexican Mafia members who came after him. His life and death stand as a reminder of what it means to lead, to risk everything for an idea, and to face the consequences head-on. Joe Pegleg Morgan stands at the top of this list. As the most dangerous and influential member of the Mexican Mafia, Joe Pegleg Morgan was a man whose story defied expectations. Born Joseph Megleg Jugorak in Los Angeles in 1929 to Croatian immigrant parents, he grew up in a predominantly Mexican-American neighborhood. His high name of Virgin Mary predicted he would become who he is, and who would, if he did, become who he still does. Over time, he immersed himself in the culture around him, learning the language, understanding the traditions, and building relationships that would later change the course of his life. Despite his ethnicity, Morgan became deeply respected within the Mexican-American community, a rare achievement for someone who was not born into it. From an early age, Morgan showed a keen understanding of how to navigate the challenges of his environment. He joined the Primera Flats gang as a teenager, and it wasn't long before his intelligence and resourcefulness set him apart. Even after he lost his leg and was fitted with a prosthetic, earning him the nickname Pegleg, his determination never wavered. If anything, it strengthened his resolve as he refused to let his physical limitations define him. Morgan's entry into the Mexican Mafia was not typical. By the time he joined La M, the organization was already becoming a dominant force within the California prison system, but what set Morgan apart was his ability to think strategically and act decisively. He wasn't just another member, he became a leader. His intelligence and vision allowed him to forge connections that others could not, including partnerships with powerful Mexican cartels. These alliances brought a steady flow of drugs into the US and secured a new level of power and influence for the Mexican Mafia. One of Morgan's most infamous actions was orchestrating the first prison gang street execution in Los Angeles in 1971. This act sent shockwaves through the criminal world and solidified La M's reputation as an organization that could enforce its will, even beyond the prison walls. Morgan understood that fear was a powerful tool, and he used it to maintain control and command respect. Under his leadership, the Mexican Mafia expanded its reach, both in terms of geography and influence. He was not a man who sought attention for himself, but his decisions shaped the organization into one of the most feared and respected criminal groups in the country. Morgan's legacy is one of transformation. He took a loosely organized group and turned it into a structured, powerful entity that would outlast him by decades. Pegleg Morgan's story is not just about power. It is about the impact of determination, intelligence, and an unrelenting drive to succeed. He broke barriers, commanded loyalty, and left a lasting imprint on the history of organized crime. While his actions were undoubtedly controversial, his name remains one of the most recognized in the history of the Mexican Mafia. To many, he was more than a leader. He was the personification of what the organization could achieve when guided by strategy and vision. The legacy of the Mexican Mafia, or La M, is one that continues to leave its mark on organized crime, prison systems, and street culture across the United States. What began as a means of survival for Mexican-American inmates in the 1950s grew into an organization that reshaped the landscape of gang culture and criminal operations. From organizing contraband networks to controlling entire prison yards, their influence was undeniable. They created a hierarchy, a chain of command that made their decisions law, not only for members but for anyone who found themselves within their sphere of power. Outside of prison, their reach extended far into the streets, changing the way gangs operated in neighborhoods across California and beyond. Through alliances, taxation systems, and their hold over drug distribution, the Mexican Mafia transformed local gangs from small territorial groups into a network that worked to support their broader criminal enterprise. This shift in power changed the way crime was organized, bringing a level of coordination and structure that was previously unseen. But their legacy goes beyond their influence over crime. It also speaks to the impact they had on communities, families, and individuals. For decades, the presence of La M created an environment of fear and uncertainty in many neighborhoods. Their control over street gangs often led to violent confrontations, not only with rival groups but also within their own ranks. The effects of their actions can still be felt today, as communities continue to grapple with the consequences of their activities. The Mexican Mafia's story also highlights the systemic issues within the prison system that allowed such an organization to flourish. Overcrowding, racial tensions, and the lack of rehabilitation created the conditions for La M to take root and thrive. Their story serves as a reminder of how power can grow in even the most controlled environments, and how systems meant to contain violence can sometimes become the breeding ground for it. Culturally, La M became more than just a gang. They became a symbol, a name that carried weight far beyond the criminal world. For some, they were a source of fear. For others, they were seen as a reflection of resilience, a group that carved out their place in a world that often sought to marginalize them. This duality makes their legacy both complex and far-reaching. As we reflect on their history, it's clear that the Mexican Mafia is more than just a story of crime. It's a story of survival, power, and the choices people make when faced with impossible circumstances. Their actions left a lasting impact, one that continues to shape the lives of those connected to their world, whether directly or indirectly. The story of La M is a part of the broader history of organized crime, but it is also a part of the history of the communities they emerged from, and the system that enabled them to rise. The story of the Mexican Mafia is not just about a gang. It is a story of power, control, and the far-reaching consequences of choices made in some of the harshest environments imaginable. From Ramon Mundo Mendoza, who found a way to walk away from the life he once embraced, to Pegleg Morgan, whose intelligence and leadership reshaped the organization, their stories are as complex as they are significant. Each of the individuals we have explored contributed in their own way to the rise of La Ami. Some sought redemption, others cemented their place in history through acts of violence and cunning. Together, they created an organization that extended its influence far beyond prison walls, into neighborhoods, streets, and lives across the nation. But their story also raises larger questions about the systems that allowed them to rise, the conditions that shaped their paths, and the impact their actions continue to have on society today. What does their journey reveal about the nature of organized crime and its ability to adapt and thrive in unexpected ways? And what does it say about the communities and institutions that both resisted and at times enabled their power? As we conclude this chapter, we leave you with these thoughts to consider. What are the lessons to be learned from the Mexican Mafia's history, and what does their legacy mean for the future of organized crime? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the world of true crime. Explore more with our related videos like The Most Dangerous Gangs in America or The Rise of Organized Crime in the United States. Your support helps us uncover and share these stories, shining a light on the forces that shape our world. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.